Hello everyone and welcome again to this Python course. So we're here on our two conversions, variables and comparisons, where we are learning the basic elements and the basic components of the Python language. Now let's go for this notebook, 3 comparison, logical and identity operators, where you'll learn these 3 types of operators that will be super important throughout our coding. As usual, I'll be working on my working notebook, so I'll delete all this code. I'll put here the first one, which will be comparison operators that we'll learn. So comparison operators. Okay, cool. Now comparison operators are normal operators that one would do with mathematical concepts. For instance, there's a really common comparison operator, which is the greater than sign. Of course, we all expect that when we do a greater than, we are expecting to compare some type of element A with element B. One of the things that I can do here in Python is, for example, comparing if 2 is greater than 1. Can you guess what type of variable we'll get from this comparison? Let's see. We'll have a true. So every time we are doing a comparison operator, we'll have a Boolean variable, because this true is, of course, true or false, the Boolean variables or the bool data types that we've learned already. Now, of course, if I switch this, I have less than. With less than, of course, I'm comparing if 2 is less than 1. It's not, so here I'll have as a return a false. Now, comparison operators are super important to do all types of mathematical and other types of comparisons here in Python. We've learned less than and greater than. These are the most basic comparison types. But before jumping into other comparison, do you think that we can pick up this expression and assign it to a variable? Combining this with the lecture that we've done before, let's see. So if I do, for example, comp equals to 2 less than 1, let's see if this works. It does. So right now we are picking up on the result from this comparison and storing it in the comp object. And that comp object, as we will see, if I print the comp object, I have a false, which is indeed the result from this comparison. So I can pick up and do these comparisons and store the result inside the variables that we've already studied. And this is pretty common to do here in Python when we get to our functions and more advanced programming, where we are controlling the flow of our code. For example, checking if we want to do a specific thing based on a condition, we'll use a lot of these comparisons, storing them in variables or not, but getting these values from the comparison. We'll get there when we deal with more more complex programming than what we are doing right here. Okay, so if I have this comp right here, this false, I can, of course, call the type on this comp, which is indeed a bool data type. Everything that we are seeing so far should not be weird or strange to you, because we've already studied all these concepts. Okay, so if you didn't understand any of these parts, drop me a message. I'll be happy to help you on understanding these concepts, because we are starting to compound on more and more things that we've been learned in the past lectures, and now this will be pretty important to pick up. Okay, so other comparisons, we've seen greater than, less than. We also have less than equal or greater than equal, and that's super simple to do. For example, 2 is greater than or equal to, so I add an equal next to the greater than sign. Okay, it doesn't have a space or anything like that. It needs to be all together, so the greater than or equal to. Of course, this will yield to true. Let's see if this makes sense. If I just do 2 is greater than 2, of course it's not. It's false, so I get yield as false. Let me zoom in this just a bit on this lecture. Okay, we also have 2 less than or equal to 2. This will yield true, of course. If I do 1 is less than equal to 2, it is also a true. Apart from greater than or less than comparisons, we also have the equality comparison, which is a really special case, okay? Because this will probably confuse you a bit. You're thinking that equality should be an equal, right? But we've seen that one equal is assignment, is when we are picking up something that we are doing in Python code and storing it in a variable name. So for equality, we must have another type of operator. It's simple, it's just using double equals. So never forget this. This is one of the most common mistakes that people do when they start to code in Python. It's confusing the equality, which is this operator that I have right here, with two consecutive equal signs and assignment, which is just 1. Okay, this is important. So is 1 equal to 1? It is, of course, but is 1 equal to 2? It isn't. And now here that I'm doing also makes sense to see if A is equal to B, now that I'm using equality. And let's see, this is false, of course, because A is not the same as letter B. But if I do A is equal to A, then I have a true in return. Okay? Now, as I have equality, I also have inequality, which is exactly the opposite. If I do is 1 equal to 1, this will yield to true. To do an inequality, I just have to substitute the first equal for an exclamation mark. So this translates to not equal. And I do, if 1 is not equal to 1, that's false, because 1 is indeed equal to 1. If I do 1 is unequal to 2, what do you think this will yield? Let's see. It's of course true, because 1 and 2 are not the same. Okay? And here, as we've seen, don't forget that the inequalities work just fine. So Z different than A, and A is different than B. This works. The equality is also the same. Now, one of the cool things is that is A in uppercase equal to A in lowercase? It is not. Okay? This is not case sensitive. So just make sure that although it's an A, these are two A's, they are different for the computer because they are two completely different letters in terms of how they are stored in a computer. Okay, don't forget about it. Okay, so we've got our first approach into comparison operators, dealing with greater than, equals to, less than, equal to, and inequality and equality. So we've just studied this on a high level. Of course, we'll have more opportunity to deal with them in the future. Now, you might be thinking, how do we combine these operations? What if I want to test two conditions at the same time? That's where the logical operators will come. That's what we'll study in the next lecture. I'll see you there.